How much can I increase my rent if I am a Solano County landlord? Hi, I'm Derek Termian with Krystle Properties. We are located in Solano County with offices in Vallejo and Benicia. We serve Vallejo, Benicia, American Canyon, as well as Fairfield. So today we're going to talk about how much you can increase rent in Solano County. This used to be a much simpler question, but now we have the Tenant Protection Act. So what is the Tenant Protection Act and who does it apply to? So back in 2019, the California State Legislature passed the Tenant Protection Act of 2019. You've probably also heard this referred to as AB 1482, a pretty common phrase to hear around the real estate world here in California. Well, the Tenant Protection Act, this applies to properties that are more than one unit. This is assuming that the landlord doesn't live in one of the units themselves. If the landlord does live in the unit, there's some special details as far as how many units would qualify you for TPA. I would defer to an attorney if you are living in the property because there's a couple of determining factors. Are these bedrooms within the home? Are these separate structures? Things of that sort. So if you're living in the property wondering if the Tenant Protection Act applies to you, do consult an attorney. If you are a corporation or it's an LLC where one of the members of the LLC is a corporation, then the Tenant Protection Act applies to you. And here is an important one that a lot of people don't know. If you have not given the appropriate notice to your resident or your lease agreement, if you entered into it after, July 2020, if your agreement does not state that it is not a TPA property with the correct language, then technically it does have the Tenant Protection Act applying to it. If you are in that category or not in that category, I again do recommend that you find a good landlord tenant attorney that can help you determine and, if necessary, get the appropriate notice out. With that caveat past us, how much can you increase your rent? We'll start with the Tenant Protection Act properties. So Tenant Protection Act properties, they can increase rent annually 5% plus whatever the CPI index is, or here in Solano County, we go off of the CPIU. It's a combination of a couple of the metro areas around us. And this number resets every single August. And the CPI or CPIU number, that is factored from April to April. So April 2022 through April 2023, our CPIU increase was 4.4%. So any increase that takes place tomorrow or later, 9.4%. That is the maximum increase you can do for a Tenant Protection Act property. We've talked about how much you can increase Tenant Protection Act properties. What if your property is exempt and you are a non-TPA property? Good question. If it's not an easy answer. So technically speaking, and again, I'm going to remind you I'm not an attorney. If you have any questions on this, please do consult a good attorney. Technically, you can increase the rent any amount if you are a non-Tenant Protections Act property. However, if it's over 10%, you must give a 90-day notice of that rent increase. Further, and much more important, obviously the correct notice date's very important. However, you cannot go over a 10% increase if there is a state of emergency. California has states of emergency often. We had states of emergency for COVID. We had states of emergency for the drought. We have states of emergency for wildfires. So those are statewide states of emergency, which would mean any property, whether it's a TPA property or not, 10% is the maximum amount. And that is called price gouging. Going over that 10% amount would be considered price gouging. Currently in Solano County, we actually have a local state of emergency that's been called. This is the city of Vallejo, and Solano County, of course, is part of the surrounding area. This probably would apply to other counties around us, depending on the interpretation. And again, this is, if you're going to go over 10%, just always consult an attorney. Here in Solano County, absolutely, we know we cannot go over 10% right now because the city of Vallejo has called a state of emergency, unfortunately, due to the lack of police officers available. So the city of Vallejo is supposed to be fully staffed with police officers. I believe the number was 120. At least that's what they were speaking about a couple of years ago. And currently, the police force is at just a touch under 50% of that number. So right now, if you are a landlord in Solano County, you cannot increase the rent more than 10%. Best case scenario is we get out of this state of emergency in the next couple of months, but we will be into fire season at that time, and you could expect probably another state of emergency should we have any wildfires. So going over 10% is not really recommended unless you're absolutely certain that you're not going to trigger a price gouging issue due to a state of emergency. This can be pretty difficult to navigate, and this is why I recommend, particularly here in California, where the landlord-tenant laws can be a little tough to navigate, I recommend that you hire a good property manager. Here in Solano County, if you are looking for a good property manager, of course, you've got a couple of options, but I'm going to throw Krystle Properties' name into the hat. If you are interested in giving us a call, seeing if we can work it out, if we could be good partners with your rental properties, we are happy to chat with you. Please feel free to reach out. Our information is located below. Thank you so much. And again, this has been Derek Karamian with Krystle Properties.